if you grew up as a millennial or older, you grew up watching sitcoms, right? And something that nobody realizes, but sitcoms taught you a lot if you were aware, or maybe it just subconsciously got you in your head. You know, sitcoms, what taught me about when I was watching sitcoms as a millennial, as a kid in the 90s, I learned that watching sitcoms, the mom was doing all the work. You know how the sitcoms like My Wife and Kids, Home Improvement, According to Jim, Ace and Baruch, you know, all those shows, right? Grounded for Life, Kings or Queens, some other shows I can't remember. Anyway, you know what they taught me about sitcoms, about real life? They taught me that once you become a mom and a wife and a mom, that you end up doing everything for the guy. Those sitcoms taught me you being married means doing all the housework, all the mental work, everything, while the man just go to work, come home from work, and sit in his ass in the couch to complain about the female, about his wife, right? And watching sports, whatever the hell back then people in the sitcoms watched. That's what I learned in the sitcoms. It taught me marriage equals you don't have a life. Marriage equals you had to cater to a man. And this is me in the 90s as a kid, because I was born 88. So me as a kid watching sitcoms, that's what it registered. It made me not want to have kids and be married at all. Nobody ever told me you had to get married. Nobody ever told me you have to get married. Nobody told me never get married. Nobody told me you have to get married. Nobody. I learned all this through sitcoms, through TV shows, or whatever else, right? But sitcoms told me if you get married as a female, as a woman, as a girl, you have to do everything for a guy. And as a little girl, I was like, no, I'm not doing this. You know, that's my subconscious ticket. No, I'm not doing this. Also, it taught me that as a mom, because in the sitcoms, you're a mom, right? It taught me that it taught me not to want kids either. It taught me not to want kids. It taught me that you had to do everything for the kids and for the men. And I was like, no, I don't want that life. But apparently the kid part didn't really learn it until I had to go through my own, you know. So apparently it didn't register me as a kid one. I ended up getting a kid one in my early 20s, and I learned my lesson not to have a kid. But you know, I have a kid now. My kid is 14 and all, but I learned watching sitcoms that being a mom and being a wife is all about you have to do everything for everybody, and you don't have no life, you don't have no purpose, you don't have nothing else in the world. It's only that, and that's the only role you ever will have. And it made me feel like I don't want that in life at all, even though I didn't know at the time as a little kid that what I wanted in life. But since I was little, I always rejected marriage and kids, and realizing now as an adult, looking back, realizing that I learned all this rejection of marriage and kids because of sitcoms, because of TV shows. I know a lot of people nowadays are talking about this, and a lot of people are starting to realize this, that marriage for most women, it works for a lot of women, but for the majority of women it doesn't work, because marriage for women is basically you become the second mom for a grown-ass guy. And a lot of women now in 2025, they're starting to realize that they don't want that life. But me, this is just my life, this is just my opinion, this is what I learned from watching TV shows and sitcoms and everything else. I learned at an early age I didn't want that life. So even when I was in my teenage years, I always said, no, I never want to get married at all. It was a brief moment that I did say I wanted to get married, but it was a very brief moment of my life. I was in high school. It was a brief moment. I was like, I wanted to get married. That was a very small part of it, very small. But other than that, I really never wanted to get married. And then that little brief moment went away. I was like, I don't want to get married ever. And I've been so consistent about that in my life. I've been so consistent that I never wanted to get married. I've been so consistent that I don't see myself ever getting married. If that ever happens, that guy must be an amazing guy, because me at 37, I still don't see myself ever getting married. And if I ever do, it's not gonna be a typical marriage, because I don't believe in marriage. I don't believe in weddings. I don't believe in weddings. So for me, if I ever get married, I will never want a wedding. I don't see the point of wedding. It's a waste of money and time. If it'll be like nobody will ever know that I got married, because it's nobody's business, only me and the person, if I ever get married. But being 37 and I still haven't changed my mind about marriage and weddings. I have not changed my mind yet. I'm 37 and I still think that marriage and weddings are a waste of time and money. I love being single. I've been single for a while now, and I love it. I love it because, for the simple fact that you have so much freedom when you're single, especially females. Like, I don't know, man. You get so much freedom. You get to do whatever you want when you want. You get to buy what you want when you want. You get to go to places when you want, and with nobody issues. My only problem I had to worry about is my kid, that one kid that I have. But it's so easy, you know. I still have a lot of freedom minds. I see people around me on the internet, in real life, and I see people having multiple kids, and I was like, I could never do that, because if I had multiple kids, I would be so depressed. And I was already depressed in my 20s, and had one kid, I was depressed. You know, I had one kid, I had so much anxiety and depression, and I didn't know that I was depressed and anxious in my 20s. I learned this in my 30s, when I was starting to heal myself and realized that I was depressed. But yeah, imagine I have 3 kids. Imagine I have 4 kids. Imagine I have more than one. If I was already depressed with one kid in my 20s, I couldn't imagine how bad my mental health would have been still at this age, you know. But I'm luckily that I am 37 now, and I have one kid, and I would never have another kid. Nope. And it makes me feel happier, because I'm in this time in my life. He's a teenager now, so I have more freedom, just a little bit more freedom than I did 5 years ago, because 5 years ago he was still underage. So now that he's a little older, he could stay in the house for like an hour or 2 extra by himself, and I could go to like the supermarket by myself. I get to go to the gym, you know, and he could stay home while I'm in the gym. You know, stuff like that, little stuff like that. It makes a big, huge difference, because you're able to do things for yourself. You have that little baby freedom that you get. But once, if you have like multiple kids, you don't have that freedom, because first of all, you could never leave multiple kids by themselves at home. One kid at home for an hour or 2, sure, fine. You know, and they're old enough, like they're teenagers, you know, sure, fine, right? And but I would never ever, I don't think I ever would survive if I had multiple kids. Not the way that I see life, you know. And also, you know, something else that I used to hate when I was in my 20s, they don't ask me anymore in my 30s, which is so happy. But when I was in my 20s and I had my son in my early 20s. I had my child when I was 22. And you know one thing I used to hate so much that people used to ask me? People used to ask me, oh, when are you going to have another one? Why do I want another one? Why do I want another one? Are you going to... I really hated that question. From the bottom of my heart, I really, really hated that question. Because people love telling other females to have more than one kid, but yet they're not going to take care of that kid. They're not going to take care of the second kid or the first one you already had. You know, they always say, do you want a girl? I was like, no, I do not want a girl. What do I look like? You know, what do I look like? I'm not going to have a girl. No. Why do I want another kid? You know what? You know what's always been my answer? Hell no. Every time somebody asks me, do you want another one? I was like, hell no. And I said that so much that nobody ever asks me that question. I don't know if it's because I'm in my late 30s and people stop asking women if they're going to have kids after a certain age. But in my 20s, people used to just ask me constantly, oh, when you gonna have another one? Never. And you know another question I hated with the bottom of my heart? Oh, but you're gonna meet a guy and the guy want a kid. I don't care what the guy wants. Why is it so hard for people in general in society? Is females and men, is both, mostly women. And always saying that, oh, you're gonna change your mind when you find the perfect guy. No, stop brainwashing females to think that you need a man to be happy, because you don't need a man to be happy. You have to be happy in yourself. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what's so hard for me just enjoy being by yourself, enjoy your company? How can you love yourself if you don't love yourself? How can you love somebody else if you don't love yourself? You know what I mean? How can you know who you are if you're always with somebody else? You have to learn to be single. You have to learn to love being single, to be in a relationship, if you want to be in a relationship. Because you cannot be in a relationship and then suddenly, oh, the person doesn't love me. But do you love yourself? You have to know, do you love the person? I'm not saying that people don't have a relationship and never get married, never have a relationship. People could do whatever they want. I don't care. Not my business, not my problem. I'm worrying about my own problems, my own issues, my own body, and whatever. But I do have to say something. I do advocate for a woman to learn. I wanted to... Actually, no. Hold up. Hold that thought. Because I actually want females to understand that they don't need a man to be happy. You don't need it. You don't. You don't need a man to be happy. You have to be happy within yourself. If you're not happy within yourself, how can you love somebody else? 1. 2, I hated that question of, what if you meet your perfect person? What if you fell in love with this guy? I say, I don't care what the guy says. I don't care if I fell in love with a guy. If I don't want a kid, if I don't want another kid, if I don't want to get pregnant, that's my choice, not the guy's choice. Why do my body, my choices of my body has to be, I have to ask a guy? Why do I have to ask a guy, can I have another kid? You know, why do I need to let the guy tell me we need another kid? You need another kid? No, and no. You don't need multiple kids. We don't. Be happy one. You know what? Be happy with 2 kids if you want multiple kids. I am rambling, and I'm just sharing my thoughts, my feelings, my everything. I'm just saying whatever processes my mind, because sometimes that's what we need. But that's I feel like after a certain age, people stop asking me about, I don't know, maybe my energy, just people stop asking me because of my energy. You know, I do believe that whole energy thing. I don't know. But I just wanted to talk about the sitcoms and how I learned from sitcoms not to get married, to be honest. That was my whole point of this video, that I learned from sitcoms not to get married. And now that people are realizing this, oh, well, I already knew this as a kid. I didn't need to go through the whole process of getting married to learn that most females wouldn't regret getting married. I already knew that by watching sitcoms as a kid. Well, anyway, having a good day. I had to go, so enjoy your day.